Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give you 7 tips on how to knock your MMI out of the park. I do have a couple of disclaimers before I start. Firstly, I'm not involved in the interview process at all, and I don't know exactly what schools look for in their applicants. Secondly, at schools in Canada, we're not allowed to speak about our interview experiences. We do have to sign confidentiality waivers at the time of our interview. So for this video, I won't be speaking about my experiences in my interview at all. These are just ways that I prepared before my interview, knowing what I did at that time. Okay, let's get right into this. Tip number 1 is to record yourself. I started practicing for my MMI about a month before the actual interview. And the way that I started this off was by videotaping myself in my computer's webcam. What I did at the beginning was that I looked all over the internet for practice MMI questions. Every day, I would randomly choose a question, time myself, and then answer the prompt into the camera. This was very valuable for me as it showed me quirks that I had while I was speaking, things that could distract the interviewer from my answer, such as ums, uhs, likes, but I also noticed certain gestures that I had. Sometimes I was moving my hands a little bit too much. Other times while I was thinking, I found myself looking away, and this really showed me that if I was having trouble looking directly into the camera just for practice, then I definitely needed help moving forward. Tip number 2 is to practice. Another small disclaimer is that these are tips that I use to prepare for my interview, but they're not necessarily going to work for everybody. I know that some people don't even practice for their interview. They want to be their true selves, and they fear that practicing too much will somehow ruin their flow. And I do think that this is valuable advice. But for me, even though I've had opportunities where I've interviewed over the past few years, I still get nervous during these times. And the way that I looked at it was that if I'm nervous during the interview, I'm also not being my true self. I'll share with you 3 ways that I practiced a lot. One way was to work with students who are also going through the interview process. Your school may have a MMI group that practices, and I really think that this is valuable to go to. We did practice one-on-one, but the most valuable part for me was when we set up mock MMIs. So what we would do is actually set up stations where 10 of us would sit down as interviewers, and then another 10 would act as interviewees and basically rotate around the stations. Some people only think that you get practice if you're an interviewee in this situation. I almost found that being an interviewer was more beneficial. And the reason is that you're never going to get a chance to see other people's answers in that type of format. By putting yourself in the interviewer's shoes, you get to really see what a boring answer is like. But at the same time, there's going to be a few students who give a really good answer, one that you want to strive to give as well. This really helped me tailor my responses because I knew what not to do. Another way that I wanted to practice was with people outside of my peer groups. These practice MMI sessions with other pre-meds were helpful, but what I found is that a lot of people were very similar to me, whether it was in my viewpoints, my age, my educational background. I tried to speak to as many people as I could from different age groups. I worked with aunts, uncles, students in other disciplines, and also people much older than me. I really wanted to be comfortable speaking to anybody. The third way that I tried to practice was to speak to people who had a different thought process than me. The best way that I could do this was to speak to people who were either in law school or who were lawyers. I wanted to practice with someone who viewed the world in a different way than me. I don't know anything about law, and this is a huge gap in my own knowledge. It was also great to practice with someone who wasn't afraid to challenge me on my opinions. It forced me to be really quick on my feet and to be confident in my answers and my thought process. Tip number 3 is to listen to podcasts. Again, this is just another way to broaden your horizons and to listen to topics that you may not necessarily be used to listening to. One podcast that I listened to was CBC's The Current. They were talking about current topics, but also they tried to present them in an unbiased view. I noticed that they would often bring in 2 people with different viewpoints, and that way I was able to see 2 different sides of the coin. This was often something that I never thought of, and it would allow me to understand other people's points of view. I also listened to 2 different podcasts based on subjects that I was pretty uncomfortable with. One of them is history. I listened to stuff I missed in history class. This just gave me more information about things that I didn't know at all. The other podcast I listened to a lot with stuff you should know. They're very good at talking about really random things, and I got to learn new things in a very short amount of time. One caveat to listening to podcasts is that, as you probably have noticed, a lot of what I'm talking about is about your viewpoint and your thought process. These are difficult things to change within 1 month before the interview, so what I would recommend is trying to listen to these as soon as possible. If you're interviewing for next cycle, this is a perfect way to prime yourself over the next year. Tip number 4 is to be prepared. Check out the commute to the school that you're interviewing at. Factor in things like weather, traffic, and parking. That way, when you get there on your interview day, you're not nervous about those things. It's really important to be calm and relaxed during your interview, and small things like that can really help. Another way you can do this is to check out the school that you're interviewing at. This will be difficult if you're flying in for your interview, but if you already go to the school, feel free to take a wander through, and it'll only allow you to be more familiarized with your environment on interview day. Tip number 5 is to know your CV. When I first started practicing for the interview, I didn't really think there was any correlation between my previous experiences and the value of mentioning them in the MMI, because I had no idea what questions would be asked and if they would even relate to my past experiences. But one thing I noticed while practicing with other pre-med students, as I mentioned previously, is that the boring answers were the people who came through and just talked about the same thing. They sat down, answered the prompt, and left. And to me, this felt really robotic. I was missing that human connection of the applicant in front of me. The answers that wowed me were answers that incorporated a little bit of the applicant's background into their answer. During the MMI, you only have a short amount of time, so you can't spend the entire time talking about your experiences. That's not what the MMI is meant to be for. But after practicing with other students, I really wanted to strive to become more than just an applicant, more than just a number to the school. I really wanted to humanize myself and try to relate to the interviewer in any way possible. Again, I don't know what schools look for, but this is just something that I noticed when I was practicing with other students. Be a real person. Tip number 6 is power poses. If you aren't familiar with what power poses are, I'll link a TED Talk in the description below, and that explains it sufficiently. This is something that I came across years ago, and I thought it would be helpful to do during the MMI. I won't explain this too much because I believe the video really explains it well, but this is something you can do after you've parked your car, before you go into the building that you're going to be interviewing at. You can do this in the bathroom before you start, and you can also do this before you enter into the MMI rooms. If you're at all worried about what other people are thinking, or that you may look silly, the best advice that I can give is don't care what other people think. You're doing your best to showcase your true self. And if there's something that you can do to give you a little boost of confidence, go ahead and do it. Tip number 7 is to relax and be yourself. I know you're probably rolling your eyes at this point, and I was too when other people used to tell me this. As I've mentioned before though, I really believe that being relaxed is underestimated. Receiving an interview for medical school is a huge achievement in itself, but I believe that too many students think that this is the be-all, end-all in their path towards their future career. A lot of people think that if they get an interview this cycle, they have to make the most of it, and it's going to be a wasted opportunity if they don't get in. I really believe that this is putting too much pressure on applicants. If I didn't get in last year, that was okay, because my interview experience was only going to help me in future years. And I wasn't necessarily being unconfident, it was merely a way for me to relax myself on the interview day. And ultimately, it is the truth. If you got an interview this year, you can also get one next year. Don't put that much pressure on yourself. It's not healthy for you, and it's also not going to allow you to showcase who you really are. And finally, you may have noticed that none of these tips are actually geared towards answering the questions. They're all ways to feel more confident going into your interview, being able to refine your thought process, answering questions in the time limit, and being more comfortable. It's difficult for somebody like me to talk about answers that the schools want to hear, because I really don't know what that is. The only thing that I could do before the interview was to practice being myself and showcasing that I am a kind person and that one day I will make a good doctor. Some of you may be wondering why I'm making this video. I was very fortunate to be able to turn to people in my life who were able to help me during this process. Not only people who I could practice with, but also people who were able to give me advice. Neither one of my parents are in medicine, so I didn't have those types of networks to turn to. I was able to speak to aunts who were nurses, other people in the healthcare field, and really anybody who was willing to talk to me. So for people who don't have those types of resources, hopefully a video like this will help you prepare. The second reason why I wanted to make this video is because there's a lot of companies out there who, in my opinion, take advantage of students who are willing to do anything and to spend any amount of money to achieve a lifelong dream of theirs. I'm somebody who really advocates for equity, and I don't think it's entirely fair that there are some students who are able to spend on information like that, and there's a lot of students who aren't. My hope is to help someone who doesn't have networks that they can turn to, financial resources that can help them pay for some type of course, or even help someone in a geographical location that doesn't allow that to happen. Again, I just wanted to share tips that I was given before my interview that you may not know. Hopefully you found these tips useful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe. It really helps me to know what type of content people like and what I can make in the future. Thanks for watching, and good luck preparing for your interview.